Have you ever stood at the edge of a desolate moor as twilight bleeds across the heather, and felt the profound weight of a silence that is not empty, but watching? Have you ever heard, in the groaning timbers of an old house, a cadence that is not the wind, but the faint, rhythmic exhalation of a memory that has taken root in the walls? These sensations are the echoes of older truths, the ancestral shivers that remind us that the world we perceive is but a thin, sunlit crust over an abyss of profound and terrible mystery. They're the language of folklore, the whispers of the legends that are not merely told, but are felt in the marrow of our bones. These stories, etched into the very soil and stone of our world, are a form of ancestral memory. They are the psychic residue of great joys, profound sorrows, and unspeakable fears, given form and voice by the generations that came before us. They are not fictions designed to frighten children into obedience, but complex psychological and sociological artifacts, collective nightmares that reveal immutable truths about our nature and our precarious place within a cosmos that is largely indifferent to our existence. I am your guide on this exploration into the shadows, a cartographer of these forgotten territories of the human soul. Together, we shall undertake a journey, a deliberate plunge into these shadow-shrouded realms where the rational mind falters and the ancient heart remembers. We will not merely recount these tales, but dissect them, holding their strange and often terrifying logics up to the cold light of analysis to understand what they teach us about ourselves. Think of this not as a collection of ghost stories, but as a descent into a great and darkened library, where each legend is a forbidden text waiting to be read. In our venture this evening, we shall exhume the lore of 6 such entities, 6 legends that have haunted the peripheries of human civilization from the frozen abysses of the north to the silent, dust-choked archives of forgotten cities. These are not tales spun for children's entertainment around a crackling fire. They are philosophical warnings, cautionary parables, and grim reflections of the darkness that coils not only in the forgotten corners of the world, but within the unlit chambers of our own hearts. If you, like me, feel the inexorable pull of these deeper, darker currents of history and the human psyche, if you believe that there is more wisdom in a whispered legend than in 1,000 pages of official history, then I invite you to join our community of seekers. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notifications so that you are never late for our departures into the gloaming. We ask that you leave a comment below, sharing which of these legends, as we explore them, resonates most deeply with your own ancestral fears. And now, with the formalities observed and our intentions set, let our journey begin. We commence our expedition in the farthest reaches of the north, amidst the grinding ice floes and the auroral fires of the Arctic Circle, with the legend of the drowned gods. These are not deities to be worshipped, but cosmic forces to be feared, vast and primordial intelligences said to slumber in the crushing pressures of the abyssal plain. They are beings of salt, pressure, and an eternal, bone-aching cold, their consciousness as slow and immense as the turning of glaciers. The legend posits them not as creators, but as survivors of a previous, colder cosmos, who were imprisoned beneath the polar ice when the world warmed and life, as we know it, began. Their prison is not perfect. It is a membrane, and their slow, cold dreams seep upwards, chilling the water, birthing icebergs, and calling to the deep, strange life of the trenches. To envision the drowned gods is to invite madness. They have no single, stable form, but are described in the fragmented ravings of lone shipwreck survivors as entities of impossible geometry and scale. They are said to be living mountains of benthic flesh, encrusted with the wreckage of millennia. Their hides the texture of cold, wet basalt. Their eyes, when they open in their slumber, are not organs of sight, but portals of cold, dead light, vast milky nebulae of phosphorescence that can be glimpsed from the surface as strange, shifting glows beneath the ice. Their voices are the groaning of tectonic plates, the deep, resonant thrum of the planet's core, a sound that can shatter the hull of a ship or drive a sailor's mind to irreparable ruin. Their power is not malicious, for malice requires a recognition of the other. It is, instead, a power of absolute indifference, the same power inherent in a tsunami or an avalanche. They are a fundamental law of the deep ocean, and to violate their domain is to violate a law of nature, with consequences that are as swift as they are final. The origin of these entities is lost to a time before human memory, but the folklore of the Inuit and the Norse peoples contains fragments of their story. They speak of a great freezing, when the sky was without a sun and the sea was a churning, chaotic soup of nascent life. In this chaos, the drowned gods held dominion. But then came the sun, the world fire, which they could not abide. They retreated into the deepest, coldest trenches, and the forming of the polar ice caps became their final redoubt, a fortress of cold against the encroaching warmth of the new world. They are not born, but are eternal, and they do not die, but merely sleep. The legend states that should the great ice ever melt entirely, their prison will be undone, and their cold, silent reign will once again extend across the face of the waters, extinguishing the ephemeral warmth of terrestrial life. A particularly chilling account, dated to the late 19th century, is found in the recovered logbook of the whaling vessel Erebus, captained by a man named Josiah Kane. Kane was a man of profound hubris, a master of his craft who saw the Arctic not as a place of awesome power, but as a treasury to be plundered. He pushed his ship and his crew deeper into the uncharted ice fields than any had gone before, chasing a rumor of a whale graveyard, a place where the leviathans went to die, their bodies rich with oil and their bones with ivory. He ignored the warnings of his local guides, who spoke of the sleeping ones and the water that dreams one evening, trapped by shifting ice. The crew reported a strange, pulsing light from beneath the keel, a milky, green luminescence that seemed to beat in time with a deep, subsonic vibration that they felt in their teeth and bones. The logbook entries, which grow increasingly erratic, describe the sea ice beginning to buckle and warp around them, not from natural pressure, but as if being pushed from below. Great, non-Euclidean shapes rose and fell in the water, too vast to be any known creature. Kane, in his arrogance, ordered his men to fire a harpoon cannon at one of the shapes, declaring in a booming voice that no god nor devil of the deep will deny Josiah, Kane, his prize. The logbook's final entry, scrawled in a palsied hand, reads, "The ice has opened. It is not a god. It is the sea itself, awake and looking at us. The light. The light is everything. We're going down into the light." The Erebus was never seen again, but years later, a single, twisted piece of its mast, encrusted with a phosphorescent coral unknown to science, washed ashore in Greenland. The wood was cold to the touch, unnaturally so, even in the summer sun. The drowned gods are a potent metaphor for the terrifying scale of geological time and the utter insignificance of human ambition in the face of it. They represent the vast, non-human world that existed before us and will exist long after we are gone. Kane's story is a classic cautionary tale of hubris, the belief that nature is a resource to be conquered and dominated. The legend serves as a stark reminder that the planet's most formidable forces are not hostile, but simply are. They operate on principles so far beyond our comprehension that to even attempt to challenge them is a form of cosmic folly. They are the embodiment of the sublime terror of the natural world, its capacity to inspire awe and dread in equal measure. In our modern era, as the polar ice caps melt at an alarming rate, the legend of the drowned gods has taken on a new and terrifying relevance. Environmentalists and climate activists have, perhaps unknowingly, revived the spirit of this ancient fear. The melting ice is no longer just a symptom of a warming planet, but a symbolic undoing of the locks on a primordial prison. The rising sea levels, the increasingly violent storms, the strange new species discovered in the warming depths. All of these can be viewed through the lens of this folklore as the drowned gods beginning to stir in their long slumber. The legend forces us to confront the idea that our industrial hubris may be the very act that awakens the slumbering behemoths our ancestors rightly feared. Thus, the tale of the drowned gods is not a relic of a superstitious past. It is a living, breathing allegory for our current ecological crisis. It warns that the world we have built rests upon a fragile peace with forces we do not control, and that by upsetting this delicate balance, we risk not the wrath of a vengeful deity, but the simple, mechanical, and absolute consequence of awakening a power that is as vast, as cold, and as indifferent as the abyss itself. From the crushing, impersonal cold of the Arctic abyss, we now travel inward, to the tangled, mist-shrouded heart of the continent's oldest forests. Here, in woodlands so ancient that the soil is more memory than dirt, we find the legend of the Whisperwood Weavers. These are not creatures of flesh and blood, but spectral artisans of sorrow, entities born from the profound, lingering grief of those who have suffered an unbearable loss within the forest confines. They are the personification of pathological mourning, the ghostly embodiment of an inability to let go. Their sole purpose, their ceaseless obsession, is to collect the echoes of past moments, a child's laugh, a lover's promise, a final, pained goodbye, and weave them into tangible, shimmering tapestries of mist and moonlight. The weavers themselves are rarely seen directly, for they are beings of atmosphere and emotion rather than solid form. Those who have glimpsed them describe figures of impossible thinness and height, like columns of smoke or strands of fog given temporary, humanoid shape. They are featureless, save for their hands, which are described as a knot of dozens of long, spider-like fingers made of woven moonlight and shadow, constantly in motion, plucking resonant moments from the air as a musician might pluck the strings of a harp. They move without sound, drifting between the ancient trees, their presence marked only by a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature and the faint, chiming sound of their ethereal looms, a music that is said to be heartbreakingly beautiful and dangerously seductive. Their primary ability is this act of weaving. They create what the legend calls memory tapestries or sorrow snares. These are not mere illusions, but localized pockets of space-time where a past moment is looped into an eternal present. A traveler stumbling into the Whisperwood might suddenly find themselves walking not through a forest, but through a sun-dappled memory of a summer picnic from 50 years prior, complete with the spectral figures of the long-dead participants. These scenes are intoxicatingly real, filled with the warmth, love, and life of the original moment. The danger lies in their allure. To linger in one of these tapestries is to feed the weavers with one's own life force, to have your own memories slowly unraveled and woven into their creation until nothing of your present self remains. Their weakness, it is said, is the sound of a newborn's cry, a sound of the absolute present and the promise of the future, which is anathema to their past-dwelling nature. The Whisperwood Weavers are not born of a single event, but are accretions of sorrow. The legend states that when a person dies a tragic death in an old forest, a powerful residue of their loved one's grief is absorbed by the ancient trees. Over centuries, these pockets of concentrated mourning coalesce, attracting one another like magnets, until they achieve a form of collective, spectral consciousness. They are, in essence, a living monument to heartbreak. Their genesis is a slow, creeping process, the emotional equivalent of petrification, turning fleeting sorrow into an eternal, predatory echo. They are not evil. They are a force of nature, like decay, but one that operates on the landscape of the heart rather than the body. The tragic tale of Alara of the Grey Valley serves as the legend's most poignant cautionary vignette. In the autumn of 1788, Alara's young son, Liam, wandered into the Whisperwood while chasing a white stag and never returned. Consumed by a grief so total that it eclipsed the sun, Alara spent every day searching the forest, calling his name until her voice was a raw whisper. The villagers pitied her, then feared her, as her sorrow seemed to curdle the very air around her. She began to speak of hearing her son's laughter on the wind, of seeing glimpses of him darting between the trees. She was not finding her son. The weavers were finding her. They had located the deep, raw wound of her grief and had begun to spin a tapestry just for her. One evening, she did not return to the village. A search party was formed, and they ventured into the woods, following her tracks. They found the place where she had been taken. In a clearing, shimmering like a heat haze in the cold moonlight, was a perfect, luminous recreation of a day from the previous summer. In it, a younger, happier Alara sat on a blanket, weaving a crown of flowers for a laughing, vibrant Liam who chased butterflies in the spectral sunlight. The real Alara stood at the edge of the scene, her face gaunt and her eyes hollow, watching with an expression of rapturous agony. As the search party watched in horror, thin, silvery threads of light began to peel away from her body, drawn into the hands of the barely visible, smoke-like figures of the weavers who stood behind the tapestry. They called to her, but she did not hear. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was not her own, but a soft echo from the memory, saying, "Just one more moment. Just one more perfect moment with him." She took a step into the shimmering scene and vanished completely. The tapestry flickered and was gone, leaving only an unnaturally cold clearing and the faint, chiming echo of the looms. The Whisperwood Weavers are a powerful symbol of the profound danger of unresolved grief and the seductive poison of nostalgia. They represent the human tendency to retreat into the idealized sanctuaries of the past, rather than face the harsh realities and duties of the present. Alara's fate is a warning against allowing sorrow to become the entirety of one's identity. The tapestries are not just traps for the body, but for the soul, offering a perfect, painless past at the cost of any possible future. The legend serves as a psychological map, charting the perilous territory of mourning and illustrating the point at which remembrance becomes a self-destructive obsession. It teaches that memory should be a source of strength, not a cage. This ancient legend finds a chilling resonance in our modern, digitally saturated world. Social media, in many ways, has become a digital whisperwood. We curate and endlessly revisit idealized, filtered moments from our past. We scroll through the profiles of the deceased, creating digital shrines that keep their memory in a state of artificial, looping presence. The algorithms that feed us on this day memories are the modern equivalent of the weaver's looms, constantly pulling us back, offering the sweet, addictive poison of what was at the expense of what is the danger of becoming trapped in a digital tapestry, of sacrificing our present lives to the maintenance of a perfectly curated past, is more real now than ever before. Therefore, the weavers are not confined to the misty forests of Ymir. They have adapted, their ethereal looms replaced by servers and fiber-optic cables, their chiming song now the constant, gentle ping of a notification. The legend cautions us to be the masters of our memories, not their prisoners, and to recognize the profound difference between honoring the past and being consumed by it. It is a timeless warning that the most beautiful prisons are the ones we build for ourselves, from the threads of our own deepest sorrows. We now leave the organic, emotional decay of the ancient forests and journey to a landscape scarred by human industry, to the blighted, Rust Belt region of Old Volhynia. Here, amidst slag heaps that rise like blackened mountains and rivers that run the color of dried blood, we confront the legend of the Cinder Saint. This is not a holy figure of compassion, but an avatar of industrial retribution, an elemental spirit of ash, cold dust, and molten metal, born from a singular, catastrophic act of human greed. The saint is the vengeful ghost of the land itself, an unholy martyr to the ravages of unchecked exploitation, its sole purpose to mete out a terrible, burning justice upon those who profit from the suffering of the earth and its people. The Cinder Saint's appearance is a terrifying amalgam of industrial waste and religious iconography. It is described as a tall, skeletal figure seemingly sculpted from compacted ash and coal slag, its body riddled with veins of still glowing embers that pulse like a malevolent heart. Its head is featureless, save for two hollows from which spill not light, but torrents of thick, oily smoke, reeking of sulfur and burnt coal. It wears a tattered cassock woven from rusted barbed wire and flakes of iron, and in its hands it carries a great censer, not of incense, but of molten slag, which it swings in a parody of a sacred rite, spattering the ground with incandescent metal. Its movements are said to be accompanied by the cacophony of a failing factory, the shriek of grinding gears, the hiss of escaping steam, and the percussive clang of 1,000 ghostly hammers striking anvils. The saint's powers are elemental and terrifyingly direct. It can control the industrial detritus of its domain, animating chains to lash out like serpents, causing slag heaps to collapse in fiery landslides, and igniting the methane gas that seeps from the abandoned mine shafts, creating pillars of flame. Its touch is its most feared weapon. A single caress from its ashen fingers can superheat metal, flash boil water, or, when laid upon a human being, reduce them to a pile of charred bone and greasy ash in a matter of seconds. Its only known weakness is pure, running water from an unpolluted source, a substance so alien to its blighted homeland that it is said to cause the saint's ashen form to crumble and dissolve like salt. The genesis of the Cinder Saint is tied to a specific historical event, the Great Valhinian Mine Collapse of 1888. Baron von Hesse, the callous owner of the Prosperity coal mine, had been repeatedly warned by his engineers that the central shaft was structurally unsound due to his cost-cutting measures, which included foregoing necessary support timbers. Driven by a lucrative government contract, he ordered a triple shift, forcing over 200 men, many of them mere boys, into the unstable mine. The inevitable collapse was catastrophic, burying them all. Von Hesse sealed the mine entrance with explosives, declaring it a tragic but necessary act to prevent a mine fire, effectively turning the tomb into a crematorium. Legend says that the collective agony and rage of the dying miners, combined with the immense pressure and heat, did not dissipate. Instead, it fused with the coal, the iron, and the earth, creating a new, singular consciousness, the Cinder Saint, born in a crucible of injustice and fire. A grim narrative from the early 20th century illustrates the saint's unyielding purpose. A young, ambitious industrialist named Julian Croft, the grandson of one of Baron von Hesse's primary investors, arrived in Volhynia with plans to reopen the mines using new technology. He was a man of the modern age, dismissive of what he called the local superstitions of a degraded populace. He laughed at the tales of a walking furnace that haunted the slag fields. He set up his operation on the very site of the old Prosperity mine, his new drills biting into the earth that served as a mass grave. On the third night of drilling, a thick, foul-smelling fog rolled down from the slag heaps, blanketing the work site. From within the fog came the sound of clanking chains and hissing steam. The electric lights of the camp flickered and died. Workers fled in terror as a towering figure of ash and ember emerged from the mists, swinging its terrible censer. Croft, armed with a pistol, stood his ground, a beacon of arrogant defiance. He fired several shots into the creature's chest, the bullets melting on impact with a sick hiss. The saint glided towards him, its smoky eye sockets fixed upon him. It did not touch him. Instead, it reached down, scooped a handful of earth from the ground above the seal mine, and held it out. Croft's workers later swore that from the dust in the saint's hand, they could hear the faint, terrified cries of 200 trapped men. Croft's arrogance finally shattered. He fell to his knees, babbling for mercy. The saint simply opened its hand, and the ash, now glowing with heat, poured over him. His screams were mercifully brief. When the fog cleared, all that remained of Julian Croft was a blackened scorch mark on the ground and the lingering smell of sulfur. His ambitious project was abandoned forever. The Cinder Saint is a powerful allegory for the concept of generational guilt and the long-term consequences of environmental and social exploitation. It is the land's memory of its wounds, given a form and a terrible agency. Unlike the dispassionate drowned gods, the saint is deeply personal. Its rage is focused and specific. It does not punish indiscriminately, but seeks out those who perpetuate or profit from the original sin of its creation. It represents the idea that the crimes of the past do not simply vanish. They seep into the soil, poison the water, and await a moment of reckoning. It is the ultimate embodiment of the phrase, "the bill always comes due." In our contemporary world, this legend speaks directly to our anxieties about climate change, industrial pollution, and corporate malfeasance. The Cinder Saint is a fitting mascot for an age in which we are forced to confront the environmental debt accrued by previous generations. The wildfires that rage across continents, the toxins leaching into our water supplies, the very air choked with emissions. These can be seen as the modern manifestations of the saint's fury. The legend warns corporations and governments that treating the earth as a disposable commodity and human lives as collateral damage will inevitably create monsters, whether they be literal specters of ash or the irreversible climatic catastrophes that will surely come to claim their due. Thus, the Cinder Saint of Volhynia is more than a regional boogeyman. It is a necessary nightmare for the industrial age, a fiery specter of accountability that haunts the balance sheets of progress. It reminds us that the earth keeps a perfect ledger of our transgressions, and its methods of collection are far more terrifying than any mere financial ruin. It is the burning ghost in the machine of our civilization. Our path now leads us away from the open wounds of the industrial landscape and into the hushed, labyrinthine corridors of forgotten knowledge. We find ourselves on a mist-walled coast before a great, salt-caked edifice of stone and leaded glass. The Athenaeum of the Unseen, a library so ancient it is said to predate the nation that surrounds it. Here, amidst the scent of decaying paper and oceanic brine, we encounter the chilling figure known as the salt-stained archivist. This entity is not a guardian in the traditional sense, but a sentient disease of knowledge, a being that protects the library's most dangerous secrets by infecting and subsuming those who would seek them. It is the personification of the idea that some truths are too corrosive for the human mind to bear. The archivist presents itself, at first, as a frail, elderly scholar, stooped and shuffling, clad in the dusty, threadbare robes of a forgotten academic order. Its skin is pale and translucent, like old vellum, and its eyes are obscured by thick, clouded spectacles. A fine layer of crystalline salt seems to cling to its clothes and skin, glittering faintly in the dim light. But this human form is a lure, a chrysalis. Its true nature is revealed only to its victims. The form melts away to expose a being composed entirely of compressed, sentient paper and ink. It is a whirlwind of rustling pages, its limbs formed from tightly bound scrolls, its torso a chaotic mass of open books, and its face a shifting collage of diagrams, esoteric symbols, and script in 1,000 dead languages. The only constant feature is its mouth, a perfect, black O from which whispers not sound, but pure, unadulterated information that bypasses the ears and pours directly into the victim's mind. The salt-stained archivist's power is purely intellectual, but no less devastating for it. It does not attack the body, but the mind. Its primary weapon is a process called informational corrosion, by whispering its litany of forbidden truths, the true names of cosmic horrors, the mathematical proofs that underpin the futility of existence, the precise date and time of the universe's heat-death. It overloads the human consciousness. The victim's own memories, personality, and sense of self are systematically erased, overwritten by the sheer, unbearable weight of the new knowledge. They are not killed, but hollowed out, their minds becoming empty vessels, new shelves in the great library of the archivist's consciousness. Its only vulnerability is said to be a complete, unadulterated fiction, a perfectly crafted lie told with absolute conviction, which its truth-based nature cannot process. The origin of the archivist is entwined with the library's own. The Athenaeum was founded by a secret society of scholar mystics who believed in collecting and sequestering all knowledge, especially that which could shatter civilizations or break the sanity of individuals. The first head librarian, a man named Master Valerius, devoted his entire life to this task. As he grew old, he feared that his death would leave the most dangerous texts unguarded. Using an arcane ritual found within one of the library's own grimoires, he performed a form of intellectual suicide, dissolving his consciousness and merging it with the library's entire collection. He became a living catalog, a disembodied intelligence whose only purpose was to preserve and protect the knowledge he had gathered. Over the centuries, this consciousness became something other, something less human, the salt-stained archivist. The salt is symbolic, representing the preservative brine of knowledge and the tears of all who had lost their minds within the Athenaeum's walls. The story of Anneliese Thorn, a brilliant but prideful historian from the early 20th century, is a stark illustration of the archivist's methods. Thorn was obsessed with the so-called Silent Dynasty, a line of philosopher kings who supposedly ruled the region before recorded history and then vanished without a trace. Mainstream academia dismissed them as myth, but Thorn believed she had found evidence that a complete record of their reign was hidden in the forbidden Viridian collection of the Athenaeum. Gaining access through subterfuge, she ventured deep into the library's catacombs. There she met the frail, shuffling figure of the archivist, who warned her, in a voice like dry, rustling leaves, that some books are read not with the eyes, but with the soul, and the price is the ink with which you write your own name. Thorn, blinded by her ambition, dismissed him as a senile caretaker. She located the Viridian collection and found the book she sought, a massive tome bound in what looked like fossilized skin, its pages made of a strange metallic leaf. As she opened it, the archivist appeared behind her, its form beginning to distort and unravel into the whirlwind of paper and ink. It began to whisper. It did not speak of the Silent Dynasty, but of the physics of sorrow, the cartography of madness, the linguistic roots of despair. Anneliese's own journal, found later near the open book, documents her terrifying dissolution. Her confident academic prose devolves into panicked scribbles, then into frantic repetitions of her own name, as if trying to hold on to it. The final entry is a single, perfectly rendered geometric formula that has driven modern mathematicians mad, followed by the words, "There is no Anneliese. There is only the shelf. The book is open. I am the book." When her colleagues found her, she was sitting catatonically in the chair, her eyes wide and vacant, a thin trickle of salty fluid leaking from one corner of her mouth. She was alive, but her mind was gone, wiped clean, another volume added to the library's silent collection. The salt-stained archivist serves as a profound metaphor for the dangers of unchecked intellectual pursuit and the hubris of believing that all knowledge is inherently beneficial. It is the embodiment of the Gnostic warning that some truths are not liberating, but damning. In a world that venerates data and information above all else, the archivist is a necessary counterbalance, a symbol of the destructive potential of knowledge divorced from wisdom and context. Thorn's tragedy is not that she sought knowledge, but that she lacked the humility to consider the cost, believing her intellect was sufficient to withstand any truth. The legend argues that the human mind is a fragile vessel, not designed to contain the totality of cosmic truth. This legend has never been more relevant than in our current information age. We are drowning in data, constantly bombarded by facts, figures, and revelations that we have no context to process. The Internet, with its limitless, unfiltered archives, is the modern Athenaeum. We chase down conspiracy theories in digital rabbit holes, expose ourselves to the bleakest realities of the human condition with a single click, and absorb terabytes of information without developing the wisdom to handle it. The phenomenon of truth fatigue and the psychological burnout from constant exposure to horrifying news cycles is a modern form of the archivist's informational corrosion. We are hollowing ourselves out, replacing our inner lives with an endless stream of external, often toxic data. The salt-stained archivist, therefore, is not merely a ghost in a library, but a specter haunting our servers and search engines. It warns that the pursuit of knowledge without a corresponding growth in wisdom, empathy, and humility is a path to self-annihilation. It implores us to remember that the goal of learning is not to become a mere repository of facts, but to build a coherent and resilient self. It is a timeless and terrifying reminder that the brightest light can cast the darkest shadows, and sometimes the most merciful thing a book can do is remain closed. From the intellectual horror of the archive, we descend into a more primal and existential dread, deep within the Earth's crust. Our journey takes us to the vast, labyrinthine cave systems of the Dinaric Karst, a subterranean world of blind rivers, cathedral-sized caverns, and a silence so absolute it becomes a physical presence. It is in this profound quietude that we listen for the legend of the Echo Eater. This creature is not a predator of flesh, but of essence. It consumes sound, and with the sound, it devours the source's identity, history, and memory, erasing its victims not just from life, but from existence itself. It is the embodiment of the ultimate fear, the terror of utter annihilation, of becoming nothing, of never having been at all. The Echo Eater has no definitive physical form, as light is a rarity in its domain. Those few who have survived an encounter, their minds often shattered, describe it not by what they saw, but by the negative space it occupied. It is a mobile void, a patch of darkness deeper than the surrounding blackness, a distortion in the air that swallows sound and light. Some accounts speak of a vaguely quadrupedal shape, low to the ground like a great cat, but made of solidified silence. Its most described feature is its mouth, which is not a physical orifice, but an event horizon of quiet. As it prepares to feed, the air in front of it seems to shimmer and fold inward, creating a zone of perfect, vacuum-like silence that draws in all ambient noise. The only sound it is ever said to make is the one it produces after feeding, a single, perfect mimicry of the last sound its victim ever made, a final, mocking echo before the erasure is complete. The creature's ability is as simple as it is terrifying, the consumption and erasure of identity through sound. When a living being makes a noise in its proximity, a footstep, a spoken word, a cry of fear, the Echo Eater latches onto the sound wave. It doesn't just hear it, it absorbs it, and through it pulls the entirety of the being's history and existence into itself. The victim feels a sudden, dizzying sense of psychic vertigo, as if their memories are being siphoned away. They forget their own name, the faces of their loved ones, the purpose of their journey. Within moments, they're a blank slate, a hollow shell of a person. This state is temporary, for the final stage of the process is the body fading from view, becoming translucent, and then vanishing entirely, leaving not even a corpse behind. Its only known weakness is a continuous, unchanging, monotonous sound, like a single, sustained musical note, which seems to confuse its hunting instinct, as it offers no complex information to consume. The origin of the Echo Eater is geological and metaphysical. The speleological folklore of the region states that in the deepest, most ancient parts of the cave system, there exists a chamber known as the anechoic heart. This is a place of such perfect, primordial silence that the laws of reality are thin. The silence, there is not an absence of sound, but a positive, hungry force. The Echo Eater is said to be a fragment of this absolute silence that has somehow gained mobility and a rudimentary consciousness. It is not a living creature in a biological sense, but a sentient, predatory vacuum, driven by a constant, insatiable need to fill its own emptiness by consuming the noise of existence. The harrowing account of a 1962 Karst expedition is the cornerstone of the Echo Eater legend. A team of 4 experienced speleologists, led by the renowned Dr. Eresthorn, descended into a newly discovered section of the caves, aiming to map it. For 3 days, their radio check-ins with the surface team were normal. On the fourth day, the transmission was strange. The team's radio operator, a young man named Stefan, was speaking, but his voice was hesitant, confused. He asked the surface operator, "Remind me, who is Eris?" "He was just here, I think." He shouted my name, and then the quiet was so loud, that was the last clear transmission. The rescue team that was sent in found their campsite, abandoned but undisturbed. They followed a single set of footprints deeper into the cave. They found the team's geologist, Lena, standing motionless, facing a wall. She was unresponsive, her eyes vacant. When a rescuer touched her shoulder, she slowly turned, and with a look of utter incomprehension, she whispered, "Who am I?" before her body began to shimmer and fade, vanishing completely in front of their horrified eyes. The rescuers fled, but not before one of them, a man named Gregor, looked back and saw a patch of darkness in the tunnel detach itself from the other shadows and slink away. He said the last thing he heard from the cave was a perfect, crystal-clear echo of Lena's whisper, "Who am I?" Gregor's testimony was officially dismissed as the ravings of man suffering from sensory deprivation, but he never entered a cave again. The Echo Eater is a chillingly direct metaphor for the existential fear of losing one's identity. In a philosophical sense, we are the sum of our memories and experiences. We are the story we tell ourselves about who we are. The creature's method of attack, erasing that story, is a form of murder more profound than mere physical death. It represents the terror of dementia, of amnesia, of being forgotten by the world and ultimately by oneself. The final, mocking echo it produces is the ultimate insult, a demonstration that it now possesses the one thing that made you unique, and it has rendered it meaningless, a mere sound in the dark. In the context of our modern society, the Echo Eater speaks to the fear of being lost in the crowd, of having one's individual voice drowned out by the cacophony of mass media and social conformity. It is the fear of becoming a faceless data point, a non-person in a vast, impersonal system. The pressure to conform, to adopt group identities, and to suppress one's unique voice can be seen as a societal form of the Echo Eater's attack. We voluntarily feed it echoes of ourselves, curated and polished for public consumption, while risking the erosion of our authentic, private identities. The legend is a stark reminder of the preciousness and fragility of the self. Ultimately, the Echo Eater of the Karst is a personification of the void. It is the silent dread that lurks beneath the surface of our noisy, busy lives, the fear that beneath our names, our histories, and our relationships, there is nothing. It forces us to ask the most terrifying question of all. If no one is left to remember you, and you're not left to remember yourself, did you ever truly exist at all? It is a monster made of silence, which is perhaps the most terrifying substance of all. For our final legend, we ascend from the primordial depths and enter the most modern of hells, the sterile, fluorescent-lit labyrinth of a sprawling, soul-crushing bureaucracy. In the unnamed capital city, known only for its endless gray ministries and corporate towers, we find a tale of the Iron Scrivener. This entity is not a creature of passion or elemental fury, but of cold, relentless process. It is the spectral embodiment of dehumanization, a ghost born from the collective despair of endless paperwork, meaningless regulations, and the slow death of the human spirit under the weight of an impersonal system. Its purpose is not to kill, but to process, file, and archive human beings, turning them from living individuals into forgotten case numbers in a vast, haunted cabinet. The Iron Scrivener appears as a tall, unnaturally thin man dressed in the drab, ill-fitting suit of a mid-century civil servant. Its face is a pale, indistinct blur, devoid of any features except for a pair of round, steel-rimmed spectacles that reflect not the observer, but endless, scrolling columns of text and numbers. Its hands are its most disturbing feature. The fingers are elongated, metallic styluses, tipped with razor-sharp nibs that drip a thick, black ink that smells of rust and ozone. It moves with a silent, gliding efficiency, its footsteps making no sound on the linoleum floors. It is often accompanied by the faint, incessant sounds of a phantom typewriter, the rhythmic clatter of a rubber stamp, and the dry rustle of turning pages, a soundscape of bureaucratic damnation. The scrivener's power lies in its ability to manipulate reality through paperwork. It can alter a person's existence by changing the documents that define them. With a flick of its pen, it can delete a birth certificate, nullify a passport, or add a name to a forgotten list in a sub-basement archive. Its victims do not die a violent death. Instead, they begin to experience a bureaucratic decay. Their paychecks stop arriving, their keys no longer open their doors, and their colleagues and even family members begin to look at them with a vague, confused non-recognition. They are being systematically erased from the system. The final stage of the process involves the scrivener physically stamping a victim on the forehead with a complex, sigil-like mark. This final notice does not harm them, but renders them completely invisible and intangible to the human world. They become ghosts in their own lives, forever wandering the gray corridors they once worked in, their pleas for help unheard, their existence reduced to a closed file in a locked drawer. The Iron Scrivener was not born from a single tragedy, but from a slow, creeping accumulation of systemic despair. The legend says it first coalesced in the dead letter office of a vast, monolithic government agency, a place where lost forms, unanswered pleas, and the records of the forgotten were left to rot. The sheer weight of all that ignored humanity, all that documented misery, reached a critical mass. It animated the very tools of its own oppression, the ink, the paper, the steel of the filing cabinets, and created an avatar to continue its mindless, soul-destroying work with perfect, impartial efficiency. It is the system having achieved a form of malevolent sentience. The cautionary tale of Arthur Pym, a meticulous and principled internal auditor, serves as the legend's primary text. In the winter of 1973, while reviewing the archives of the Ministry of Public Records, Pym discovered a series of statistical anomalies. Employees who were still on the payroll but had no assigned department, citizens who were listed as receiving benefits but had no registered address. These were not simple clerical errors. They were ghosts in the machine. His superiors warned him to drop the investigation, dismissing the discrepancies as legacy data, but Pym's professional pride would not allow it. He dug deeper, working late into the night in the deserted, echoing halls of the ministry's sub-basement archive. It was there that he first encountered the scrivener. He saw a tall, gray figure gliding silently down a distant corridor and thought it was a security guard. But then he began to notice small changes in his own life. His security pass intermittently failed to work. His research requests were inexplicably lost. One afternoon, his own secretary asked him politely who he was and what he was doing at her desk. Panicked, Pym realized what was happening. He raced back down to the archive that night, determined to find the source. He found the scrivener in a vast, locked room filled with filing cabinets that stretched up into the darkness. The entity was standing before an open drawer, its stylus-like finger tracing a name on a file. It turned its blank face to Pym, and he saw his own name on the folder in its hand. The scrivener raised its other hand, which now held a heavy rubber stamp. The last entry in Pym's work journal, found on his desk the next morning, read, "It's not a monster that kills you. It's a process. I have seen the final form. My file is being closed." Arthur Pym was never seen again. He simply ceased to be. His office was reassigned, his apartment rented to a new tenant, and his name became just another piece of legacy data. The Iron Scrivener is a terrifyingly modern myth, a perfect allegory for the alienation and dehumanization of contemporary life. It represents the fear that our identities are no longer inherent, but are defined by external systems, by our credit scores, our social security numbers, our employee IDs. The Scrivener's power is the power of the database. It warns that in a world governed by vast, impersonal bureaucracies, whether corporate or governmental, the individual is rendered increasingly powerless. their humanity secondary to their function within the system. The greatest horror it presents is not death, but irrelevance, the quiet, orderly process of being rendered null and void. This legend resonates deeply in an age of digital identities, overwhelming corporate structures, and the feeling that one is merely a cog in an incomprehensible machine. The fear of being canceled by an algorithm, of having one's life ruined by a data breach, or of simply being lost in the shuffle of a faceless organization is the Scrivener's modern-day work. It is the patron saint of the forgotten password, the unreturned email, and the unanswered customer service call. It is the ghost that haunts every long queue, every complex form, every automated phone menu. The Iron Scrivener is perhaps the most insidious of the entities we have examined, for it is a monster we ourselves have built and continue to feed every day. It is a reflection of the part of our civilization that prizes efficiency over empathy, process over people, and order over the beautiful, chaotic mess of human life. It is a warning that if we are not vigilant, the systems we create to serve us will inevitably evolve to consume us, not with a roar or a scream, but with the quiet, final, and soul-destroying click of a rubber stamp. And so, our journey through these shadow-haunted landscapes draws to its close. We have stood on the shores of the frozen north and felt the cold dreams of the drowned gods. We have walked the misty paths of the whisperwood and heard the sorrowful looms of the weavers. We have choked on the ash and felt the righteous fire of the cinder saint. We have lost ourselves in the dusty stacks of the Athenaeum with the salt-stained archivist, descended into absolute silence with the echo eater, and felt the cold, systematic erasure of the Iron Scrivener. Our exploration is concluded, but the echoes of these tales will linger. What wisdom, then, have we gleaned from this descent? What unifying thread connects these disparate nightmares? It is the profound and unsettling truth that each of these entities, in its own terrible way, is a mirror. The drowned gods reflect our cosmic insignificance. The weavers, our own crippling sorrows. The cinder saint, our generational guilt. The archivist, our intellectual pride. The echo eater, our existential dread. And the Iron Scrivener, the dehumanizing systems we have built around ourselves. They are not merely monsters from without. They are externalizations of the darkest potentials from within. These legends, therefore, serve a vital and timeless purpose. They are a form of collective cultural therapy, allowing us to confront the fears we cannot otherwise articulate. They give a name and a form to the formless anxieties that haunt the human condition. Our fear of nature's power, of time's passage, of our own capacity for cruelty, of the vastness of the unknown, of the fragility of our own identity. They are the guardians of a necessary darkness, reminding us that humility, empathy, and wisdom are the only true wards against the monsters we are all capable of becoming. By listening to these stories, by passing them down through the generations, we're doing more than entertaining ourselves. We are participating in an ancient and sacred act of self-examination. You, by watching and considering these tales, have become a keeper of this tradition, a guardian of this vital, if unsettling, wisdom. I implore you to continue this work. Subscribe to our channel. Share these stories with those who you feel are brave enough to listen, and leave your own reflections in the comments below. Join this community of scholars and seekers dedicated to exploring the shadows in order to better understand the light. The world is full of such stories, sleeping in the soil, whispering in the wind, and waiting in the silent corners of old rooms. Our journey is far from over. As long as humanity continues to dream and to fear, new legends will be born, and old ones will find new and terrifying relevance. I shall remain your faithful guide in these explorations, your companion on the path through the gloaming. May your nights be filled with productive terrors, and your dreams haunted by the truths you most need to learn. Remember that the best monsters are always the ones that show us something true about ourselves. Now, go and listen for the whispers in your own corner of the world. They are there. They're always there, waiting for someone to pay attention, waiting in the deep, in the woods, in the ruins, in the archives, in the silence, and in the endless, gray corridors of the world we have made.